Presentation layout. Part 1 will consist of the proposed study, with the inclusion of the introduction and methods. Part 2 will contain the reflection of work, including the strengths and weaknesses, work revisions, and work process. In today's classroom, students are being introduced to a myriad of opportunities to approach learning with strategies based on technological programs. These students are converging through the learning process with cognitive advantages, interests, and habits not rendered in earlier generations. For educators, it means learning the concepts of instructional technology and design to provide learners with an educational environment versed on digital awareness and assessing digital arenas through education. Bishop and Verledger of 2013 explain, with the efforts and effects of the development in technology, a more favorable structure in educational processes is the one in which students can get access to content, interfere with it, and follow according to their own pace. To assist educators in these technological developments, professional learning can and should be executed to ensure learners are receiving the technology structure adaptive for the environment. One of these strategies would be the implementation of a flipped classroom. In a flipped classroom setting, educators introduce concepts of standards within a digital instructional lesson and activate the learning process. Through a student-centered approach, educators can generate active learning with more flexibility in a flipped classroom. In an article by Brenda Danker, it was mentioned that to obtain a higher and conceptual level of thinking, the students need to take responsibility for their learning and become active knowledge seekers. In a flipped classroom, educators take on the role of facilitator, and student engagement is initialized with classroom discussion. Instructionally, a flipped classroom may be a new strategy to assist in student-centered learning, but the fundamentals lie on the educator to pursue the best practices to ensure all students receive the most effective process for learning. Having a learning environment based on student engagement means educators should research, analyze, and explore the opportunity of the new instructional strategy of a flipped classroom. In professional development, educators should be provided with the essential scenarios, practices, and techniques to implement a flipped classroom in any setting properly. A flipped classroom can be defined as the model in which students learn theoretical information with the help of various teaching materials out of school and participate in the activities based on higher order cognitive strategies for problem solving, group work, and individual guidance provided by the teacher at school. Flipped classrooms are becoming increasingly common in higher education and within a number of recent studies examining the effectiveness. In the practices of new technological strategies, studies show that video lectures slightly outperform in-person lectures, with interactive online videos doing even better per Cohen, Ebling, and Calkin. The concept of moving the lecture to the house and transitioning traditional homework tasks to the classroom lecture is appealing and engaging, per Erling. With the appeal comes barriers with time and financial constraints. Classrooms are advancing with educators and learning's lagging to financial constraints. Flipped classrooms have become a strategy of implementation in today's classrooms that provide interest and engagement in the self-pacing of the student-centered lessons. This study will provide educators who want to introduce a method in instruction that integrates technology with grade level standards to impact the motivation and achievement of student learning. Educators willing to incorporate the practices of a flipped classroom into their daily instruction will establish the students' learning in an impactful manner, generating skills of motivation and achievement in their own educational experience. The purpose of this study is to create professional development for teachers to effectively implement a flipped classroom to maximize student achievement at West Harrelson Elementary School. In this study, the proposed and central question is what impacts have been referenced in applying a flipped classroom structure for students in the learning process to establish motivation and achievement. The key phenomenon of this study shows that students do not have the motivation and the educators do not have the skills for a flipped classroom at West Harrelson Elementary School to provide a suitable education to maximize student achievement. In the research expectations of this study, the aim will be to analyze trends and contents of a flipped classroom when educators are provided with professional development. The research will guide the understanding of the employment of methodologies associated with flipped classrooms and how to adequately implement technology in digital classes to impact student learning. Within the process, the frequency of keywords and references will be integrated to eliminate the obstacles formed in using a flipped classroom structure. Instruments and resources used in this study will be surveys, observations, and interviews. The procedures at IRB approval, STEM Google Classroom, Khan's Academy, observations, interviews, and flipped classroom mindset will be implemented in the beginning, throughout, and in the end of the research process. The ethical considerations of this study are contained in two variables. In the consideration of one is to provide the participants and learners with the clarified justification of the study and each objective within the study. And the second consideration is to examine the environment. The learners are participating in the study and informing each participant of his or her part. Reflecting on this process, it has been important to look at the qualitative research process in reference to posing the question in regards to maximizing student achievement with assistance and reference that have applied and had success in the implementation of the strategy. It is important that I will explore how other researchers found success with incorporating the approach in different environments and the diversity of the participants in each study. As a researcher, I found the concept of a flipped classroom is a new approach to student-led teaching and does not follow the model of a traditional research process. It lacks the research and reflective components to exhibit the impacts of achievement and motivation. It will be necessary to implement an action research process to establish a frame to solve the problem that lacks in student motivation to yield success. Through this plan, it will be instrumental to focus on a qualitative plan to limit the bias in data collection and establish an approach to the study that presents students with motivation and advancements in the process of achievement. In this process, the revisions have taken place to focus on the multiple concentrations of a flipped classroom to advance the format and the writing style of my research. Dr. Zhang has been instrumental in providing that feedback and context in reference to our textbook to qualify the understanding of this study. It has been essential to continuously look at that feedback and revise any implementation of that plan. Please check out the references that I introduced throughout this process to collect in this qualitative research program of study.